In this video, I will show you how to refactor a component that handles API manually over to a Redux Toolkit query powered component. Also, we will be using TypeScript. Let's get started. This is the typical scenario where we use the traditional method to fetch data from an API. In this example, we are using the Poke API, which you can find if you go to Google, search Poke API, go to the first link. It will take you to this URL. We're using the API that fetches Pokemon by name. In this component, as you can see, we have an input text, a button. You can see them here. We're manually handling the state of the name, which is tied to our input text, and the state of the Pokemon that we are going to eventually fetch, the state of the loading, which represents if the data is being fetched or not, or if we're waiting for something, and errors if there's any. Here we have our handle search function that is triggered on click on this button. When it is clicked, we set the loading state to true. Then we do the fetch Pokemon part, which is an async function that goes to our base URL and adds the name of our Pokemon. We fetch the data, we set the data in the Pokemon state, and then we update our loading state to false. If there is an error, we set the error in the catch. And then we have some conditional early render. If we have an error, we just return the error name. If we're loading, we return the loading message. And if not, we return the Pokemon. There it is. Squirtle. Great. So all the state management is done manually. The loading states are also manually. The error handling and fetching the data is also manually. And this approach works, but when we need to work with many APIs and many components, it becomes verbose and repetitive to do everything manually. And here is when Redux Toolkit Query shines. Provides automatic caching, simplified data fetching, built-in loading and error states, and supports TypeScript out of the box. Now we will go step by step on how to set up RTK and RTK Query. If you go to Google and search for Redux Toolkit, here in the first result, we can go to the Getting Started section of the documentation, and we look for this option here, an existing app. We need to install Redux.js Toolkit and the React Redux. So let's do that. I'm going to stop my terminal and install Redux.js Toolkit and then React Redux. Great. Let's bring the server up again. Now we need to start setting up Redux in our app. If we go to the documentation, we first need to create our Redux store. We will do it here. We create a store file. I'm gonna copy paste this. But this is basically where all the information that Redux handles goes here. Then we need to provide the store to our application context. Then we need to provide the Redux store to React, and we do that at the root of our application. So up here we have our provider, and then our provider will require the store like so. And that's it. That's all we need for now. Then we're going to create our API, and the API is going to be handled as a Redux slice. Let's create a file here called Pokemon API under services. Little trick here, if you are creating a file and you want it to be in a folder that doesn't exist, you can specify the name of the folder followed by a slash and your file, and it's going to handle that for you here. Okay, to begin, we import create API and fetch base query from Redux.js Toolkit Query React. This is going to help us to create our API, can handle all the internals. So let's call this Pokemon API. And the API requires a reducer path, which is the name that is going to be used in the Redux store. Like that. Now we also need the base query. The base query is going to be reused for all the endpoints that we have in our Pokemon API. Here what I can do is actually start bringing things from our app component over here. So this base URL, let's just keep it to v2, give it to base query. Now we create our endpoints. What we want to do is get Pokemon by name. So we can just go and call it get Pokemon by name, like so. And here we use the builder query, which let us specify the type of the expected data, which is Pokemon. And secondly, it takes the type of the argument that we are going to give to this get Pokemon by name when we use it. And that is going to be the name, which is going to be a string. And finally, we specify the query. And the query is going to just be whatever we want after the base URL. Here is going to be Pokemon and name. And the name will be captured here as an argument, like that. RTK will automatically generate a hook for this endpoint, which we can export. And how nice is this? Like, we're using TypeScript and we get the autocomplete ready to go, which is awesome. Then in our store, we import our Pokemon API, and it looks like we are not exporting it. Oh yeah, there it is. And we connect it to the store reducer. We use the reducer path defined as the name and then the reducer. And now we need to enable the middlewares. And that will be what we need for the setup. Now we can start refactoring our app. We will bring the auto-generated hook, and this is going to receive the name. And we can see that right away TypeScript is telling us that there is a little error here. And this is because our name is undefined, which makes sense. When we load the app, this is going to be undefined. We need to fix this somehow, and RTK Query generated hook provides an option called skip that will skip any API calls based on a condition. And what we want to do here, if name is undefined or empty, we are going to skip the API call. And for now, we can just initialize our state as empty because we know that the API is not going to run unless there is something present. Now, we can destructure a few things from our hook. Data is error, is loading. And now we don't need to take care anymore of manually handling error, loading state, and not even the Pokemon. Let's continue cleaning our API. We don't need any of this. Now we're checking if there is an error. We are going to just say there is an error for now. Data, we might just rename it, right, as Pokemon, like that. There might be something else that we need to take care of here, and it is that the name is going to be updated on any keystroke, and on each keystroke we're going to be calling this our API. Just to give it a try, if I press an O, we can see that the API call is doing Pokemon/O. The good thing is that we have error handling and everything is being managed there. But what we need to do is just run the API call when the full name of the Pokemon is specified. Instead of name, let's call this search term like that. And then we're going to have another state, which is also going to be a string. And now what we're going to do is actually wait for the Pokemon name. And when we click search, only there we're going to update the Pokemon name. So great. So now let's try ditto. Awesome. Good. Since we're using Redux for this, and if you have the Redux dev tools in your browser, you can look at the state changes here. So when I search for a Pokemon like Magikarp, we can see everything that's happening in the background. If I search again for Magikarp, for example, it's not going to rerun it again. And that's amazing because I didn't have to check anything manually. Redux Toolkit Query is taking care of that for me. Now you're ready to use all the benefits that TypeScript, Redux Toolkit, and Redux Toolkit Query offers to you, like polling, refetching, skipping queries, lagged queries, optimistic updates, caching, etc. You can see all of them in the documentation. I might work on a separate video on those in specific, but let me know in the comments if there is a topic in specific that you're interested in or you would like me to cover. Link for the code on GitHub will be in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.